Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy some very meditative organ music.
Welcome to a very spooky Sunday here at First Unitarian. It is so good to be with all of you. I'm Reverend Barbie. I mean Shari. We've got the terrifyingly talented artist formerly known as Pablo, ghost formerly known as Pablo, Reverend Ken, AJ.
My job is preach.
Not today. I thought it would feel less mean after having done it in the first service. It does not. We gather here with all of you for an hour set aside from our week, our lives, and it's not just a show, something led by the three of us that joins our voices with that of the choir, with our AV team, and with a few very special guests today, including Barbara DeLeeuw and Jonathan Kyle as ghosts of our congregation. Yeah. But we gather here not only pulling threads through time from our past to our future, but also in this place, on this land. We gather here on the contemporary and ancestral land of the Seneca people, the keepers of the western door of the Haudenosaunee. We gather here as First Unitarian Church of Rochester, and we're here every Sunday at this hour, but that's not church. Church isn't 1 hour. Church isn't even 2 hours, separated by coffee and conversation in the middle. It's not a building, it's a people with a purpose, and that's who we are. Through spiritual connection in community, we listen deeply to others and ourselves. We open to wonder and transformation, and we serve together with love and humility. We gather to be reminded of our deepest values and to be inspired to live out of those values. If you came to church today because you've got something heavy on your heart, you're worried about someone, or maybe yourself, I invite you to connect with our pastoral care team. We've got a pastoral care associate in the back, Mary there. Thank you, Mary, for being a part of how we witness to one another. And if you came here today because you're like, I am busy on election day, but I'd really like to vote, a lot of us, 50 of us is my goal, so that's like 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3 of you, so I'll let you duke it out with your neighbors, are going after this service to the Susan B. Anthony House to vote together. And if you're like, but I love to go vote on election day, it feels special, I get a sticker. You get a sticker today too. And it matters that your vote is counted and counted early. It frees you up to do things on election day, like drive others to the polls or do some last-minute phone banking. It also means that you get to have the experience of waiting in line, which maybe doesn't sound appealing to you, but I want to know when I'm voting that my voice is one of many and that together we're doing something. So I will say it's a deep sadness for me when I come to vote and nobody's there. So just come with all of us and wait in the back behind me, and you can feel like, oh yeah, we're all doing this together. We are all, what's that? Oh, I'm at the back. Okay. All right. Leaders vote last. Yeah. We are all doing this together. That describes this thing right here, right now. So I'm going to invite Lisa Prescott and President Barbie together, and Rose to light our chalice. And I'll invite the rest of us to take a deep, comfortable breath and join in our unison words. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Please rise in body and spirit and join us in singing.
Gather the Spirit. Arise slide. That would be awesome. Beautiful. So the choir will sing it for us one time, and then I'm going to invite you to join us after that. So 1, 2, 3.
Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire.
That was great. So whenever that chorus comes up, please join us in singing. Atlantic and Pacific flow, the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico, the land between sustains us all, to cherish it our tireless call.
Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We reach these shores from many lands. We came with hungry hearts and hands. Some came by force and some by will, and watch and block for the conquered thrill. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire.
We died in your fields and your factories. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. With an old coat hanger in a room somewhere. A trail of tears, an electric chair.
Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire.
Our great responsibility to be guardians of our liberty,
Till tyrants bow to the people's dream, and justice flows on the mighty stream. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire.
I now invite our children forward and all young at heart who'd like to join them for our Time for All Ages. Would like to come down to the carpet for our Halloween carol service. So what is one of the most classic Well, we mentioned being visited by some ghosts this morning. We will be visited by 3 ghosts. This is a very important magical number, very important that if you're visited by ghosts, hopefully it's no more than 3. And if it's at least 3, that's, 3 is a good number. So the first of our ghosts that will be visiting us in this service, we get to meet all together. So I would like to invite the ghost of Hester Jeffries, a member of our congregation from the 19th century. Can you get another one in? I think the battery may be...
Good morning. I am Hester Jeffries.
Welcome, Hester. So would you speak a little bit about I said you're a member of this congregation. Would you speak a little bit about your relationship to our congregation?
I am a member of this congregation. I was born to free parents, so I'm a free colored person, in 1842. And I was born in Norfolk, Virginia, and I moved to Boston, Massachusetts to be with my activist and very political uncle, but it was also a safe place to raise children. I married a man named Jerome Jeffrey, whose father was a AME Zion minister. And so we married in 1871, and when my mother-in-law died, Reverend Jeffrey, sometimes they call me Jeffries, but it's actually Jeffrey, singular. When my mother-in-law died, my husband and I moved to Rochester and became very actively engaged in political work. And I met a few members of this church, Susan B. Anthony being one, and Mary Gannett, who was the wife of a minister here at First Unitarian Church.
Wonderful. And you mentioned that you were born as a free black woman, but that was fairly rare at that time in our country's history.
Yes, it's true. In the 1870s, when I moved to Rochester, there were actually 450 black people who lived here, and there were 61,000 of non-black people who lived here. So it was a small community, and we got to know each other. But I think there were more free black people than people appreciate. And so when you learn in school that all black people were slaves, that is not true.
And when you came here and meeting some of those people like Susan B. Anthony, it's just coming to mind that today we, of course, are in the week or two of early voting in the general election for the United States of America. And also our kids today will be voting for the Greater Good Project. They'll be selecting 2 of the 3 organizations that have been vetted to receive generous funds from our congregation at our Greater Good service in December. So there's a lot of voting and elections. We've got kids voting now. We've got plenty of people voting in our general election. Could you speak a little bit about what voting and elections were like in your time?
All right. Yeah, in fact, that's how Susan B. and I met, and Mary Gannett as well. We were all working for suffrage. It took another 50 or 70 years to get the vote, but we were working on that in the mid-1800s. And so voting to me is very important. And members of this church were very active in the community of suffrages and women's votes. Most of you know that in 1848, the Seneca Falls was the first women's rights convention. But did you know that the second convention was held in First Unitarian Church just a short time after that? So we've been involved here. And I'm also a member of the AME Zion, Memorial AME Zion Church here in Rochester.
So we talk a lot about our religious pluralism and people of different faiths and communities and commitments, but even back then you had a dual affiliation with our church and with AME Zion.
As I said, my father-in-law was the minister of AME Zion, but I had friends in this church, Susan B. and a few others, and so I was in members of both churches. And in fact, the Susan B. Anthony window that's in Memorial AME Church, that's that funny church that's kind of star-shaped down on Clarissa Street. Many of you have seen it. That window for Susan B. Anthony, a group of the church people got together and put a memorial in for Frederick Douglass. I had been asked to sit on that memorial committee to do that, and we put a window in Memorial AME, the black church, for Frederick Douglass. But there were a few of the women in that church who said, we need to do something for the women. So the Susan B. Anthony Club of Colored Women decided to put in a memorial window for Susan B. Anthony, and we put it in the Memorial AME Zion Church. So that window was put in by friends and with support of members of this congregation who made donations to put that window in.
Well, is there any final message you would have to share with our congregation and the children of our congregation?
Yes. You know, in my age, I couldn't vote. I was 75 years old before New York ratified the women's vote. That was 1917. 75 years. I had no voice in what was happening in Rochester, my hometown. So I would encourage everybody to start voting today, and you've got 10 days to do that, and don't take that lightly. And young people, I want to ask you to promise me that you will be sure that your parents vote, and maybe they'll even take you with them so you can see how it works. Voting in 2024 is very important. I laid the groundwork, and now it's time for you to lay the groundwork.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for spending your Halloween with us, Hester. Now we will sing our children to their classes.
We bless you on your journey through, from sheltering arms to the white sky blue, in your joyful jumps and your sad times too. You bless us by being you.
As our lights fade, I invite you to settle into your seats. If you mistakenly think we have just sent our wiggles out of the room, I know I'm keeping a few inside me. I invite you to send them out from your fingertips, from your ankles, and settle. Taking a few comfortable breaths and feeling the ground that holds us beneath us. I invite you to share silence with me. Please join me in the spirit of prayer. Spirit of life, God of many names and no name at all, love that is abundant, that holds all of us. We gather here in this space, taking a break from a 24-hour news cycle, an endless scroll of more doom, more action, more. Many of us gather feeling anxious, a tension in the air, uncertainty in our own lives, or a nation on the precipice. The tugs of threads that hold us to the land, all of creation and the people around us that spread across this planet, that sometimes feel so tight. We gather, some of us with celebration and joy, wondering if it's okay to feel this way if so many are suffering. Remind us that it is, that we are called to share to share the trials and tribulations, the joys and the liberation that each of us held in this palm of love is connected to one another. And when we start to vibrate with the news, the political mailers, help us to find a rhythm somewhere between the silence that we find here, if only for a moment, and the speed of TikTok. Help us to hear the whisper in our own selves and the reminders we can offer to one another that if only we wait and listen for it, we might find peace. Peace, my heart. Peace, my brother. Peace, my mind. Peace, my sister. Peace, my sibling, my neighbor, my love. Help us to hear that whisper. Amen. Blessed be, and Ashe. We gather in community in part to check in on ourselves. In this moment of silence, in this moment of vibrating at another frequency that is the threads that connect each of us to one another, that connect us beyond this room, we're offered a chance to say, what is it that I brought today? To bring to mind what is on our hearts, to name a grief or a growth or a gratitude that is within you, and to offer it to one another in spirit and to witness to each other's offerings. And so if you're online, I invite you to type into the chat the grief or growth or gratitude that you have to share with this community today. And if you're here in the sanctuary, I invite you to come forward. Reverend AJ and I will light our center pillar candles from our chalice. And you're invited in turn to light candles or to raise your hand and have a candle brought to you, or to simply name in your heart what you carry. May we now witness to one another. I invite you to now come forward. May all those wrestling with illness of mind and body, with grief or loneliness, with addiction or pain, feel the love of this community. All that we hold in our hearts for ourselves, for each other, and for the world is held here in the glow of the warmth that we kindle, and held too by a love that will never leave us. Amen.
Please rise in body or spirit as we join together singing our musical meditation, This Is My Song. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shore. Other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and bright as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean. The sunlit gleams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight blue, have clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
We come now to the time for our second ghostly visitation, this time from Susan B. Anthony, member of our congregation. Unfortunately, Susan B. Anthony herself is sick, under the weather, by which I mean the reenactor who is going to portray her, Barbara Blaisdell, is under the weather and could not be with us this morning. But we have a letter mysteriously apparated in Reverend Sherry's office this morning, a letter from Susan B. Anthony that I now invite up Laura Morrissey to read for us.
My dear friends, I write to you today with a heavy heart, for I'm unable to join you in casting our votes, a privilege I hold dear. Regrettably, illness has confined me to my bed, but my spirit remains resolute in our shared struggle for justice and equality. It was but a few years ago, in the year 1872, when I stood proudly among you, casting my vote in defiance of the laws that sought to silence us. The exhilaration of that moment still resonates with me. I remember the thrill of stepping into that moment, knowing I was claiming my rightful place in the democratic process, despite the opposition we faced. How I long to see that same courage reflected in every person of every gender today. Though I cannot be there in person, I implore each of you to honor the hard-fought battles we have waged. This day, as you fill out your ballots, remember that every vote is a declaration of our resolve. We are not merely participants, we are architects of our destiny. Each mark you make is a step toward the recognition of our rights and the liberation of future generations. Flipping your ballot over to vote yes on Prop 1. Will help protect those rights. If you have not yet cast your vote, I invite you to my home in Rochester today. Let us gather together in the spirit of unity and purpose. Share your stories, rally your neighbors, and ensure that our voices are heard loud and clear. I remain steadfast in my belief that our efforts will yield a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for standing strong in our shared cause. I look forward to hearing the triumphant results of your efforts. With unwavering solidarity, Susan B. Anthony.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Susan. All that our church is, of course, and all that our church does is made possible by the time, talent, and treasure that its members, that we give to its shared mission. Members and friends support this congregation financially through recurring giving, and then on Sundays, we also practice generosity through our shared collection. And we also practice generosity by sharing that collection with another organization. So today, 50 cents of every dollar given now to our offering will go to the National Susan B. Anthony House, Museum and House, which interprets the Great Reformer's vision and history to inspire individuals to make a positive difference. And we offer a special welcome. She was, I think, at the first service, so I don't know if she's here at the second one, but the director of the Susan B. Anthony House, Deborah Hughes, joined us this morning. As Laura, on behalf of Susan, invited to us all, please remember to join us for early voting at the Susan B. Anthony House, which is an early voting location. Anyone registered to vote in Monroe County can join us and can vote early anytime between now and Election Day on November 5th. You can give to our collection at rochesterunitarian.org/donate or by Venmo or here in the baskets that we will pass out. In the spirit of abundance and generosity, our offering will now be given and humbly received. Well, maybe it's just the beautiful organ music, but I think that eerie chill means that it's time for our third and final spirit to visit us. So I am excited to invite up historical Ken and by the name of John White Hearn.
Of course, by the time I helped save Frederick Douglass's life, I had admired him for many years. As a photographer here in Rochester, and then later on when I moved to Philadelphia and opened a portrait studio, I had the honor of photographing Mr. Douglass a number of times. In 1856, I wrote to my friend and, at the time, a fellow Rochesterian, Mr. Douglass, to thank him for helping to build a coalition in Kansas to help make that a free state. As he moved us away from the lofty ideals of political perfection to the necessities and struggles of today, he found a bitter struggle. To him, I wrote, "Besides the opposition of your own sense of consistency, you have to endure the misrepresentation of enemies and the misunderstanding of friends. But I am happy to see that you have triumphed over all and are bringing up your war contingent to where it can be made available to assault at least the expansion of slavery. Is this not worth fighting for?" The anti-slavery man who refuses to unite with others for the prohibition of slavery in Kansas because they are not prepared to join him in abolishing it in all of the southern states resembles a farmer who will not help his neighbors to prevent a mutually destructive flood because they are not willing to engage in the task of draining the lake from which the water flows. His plan may be the most effectual for future prevention, but they have not sufficient force to accomplish that. And unless they immediately and earnestly labor for the present protection, they are overwhelmed by the rushing waters, and their fertile fields are forever lost. Quite a good comparison, I think. But you're not here to hear about that. You want to know about a few years later when I moved to Philadelphia and Mr. Douglass was speaking there. At that time, I was a telegraph operator. The news had just been spread throughout the country of the bold action of John Brown in taking Harper's Ferry. Everyone was excited, and the public feeling ran high. Before the intelligence came that Brown had been captured, there was an untrue rumor that Douglass was one of his co-conspirators. A dispatch was sent by the sheriff of Franklin County, Pennsylvania, to the sheriff of Philadelphia, requesting that Douglass be immediately apprehended. When I received the dispatch, I was frightened nearly out of my wits. As I was an ardent admirer of the great ex-slave, I resolved to warn Douglass of his impending fate, no matter what the result might be to me. Though I knew it was illegal to do so, I quietly put the dispatch in my pocket, and asking another operator to take my place, I started my search for Douglass. I sent word through a trusted person and told him that I would not allow it to be delivered for 3 hours, and able to get Mr. Douglass out of the States. This my contact readily assented to, for it was his business to spirit escaped slaves beyond the reach of the authorities. I returned to the telegraph office and kept a sharp lookout for similar dispatches. After 3 hours, I sent the belated message to its destination, but Douglass was already on a train to Rochester and then on to Canada.
Three ghosts. Perhaps you're thinking, wait, we've got the week wrong. This is Memory Tree, our annual service of remembrance. And quite frankly, I like to skip this because I don't like death very much. Yeah, well, that's next week. And just if you happen to be one of those people who does like to skip that service because it's kind of a bummer, I know, I invite you especially to come next week. I invite you especially to hold up collectively with us the practice of being grounded in remembering our ancestors, remembering those who have loved us and whom we love, of holding the grief of what it means to be fully human, to hold the other part of love that we risk when we live fully. But we're not at Memory Tree. We're at some weird mashup of the election and Halloween, which is like as scary as it gets. So we have ghosts to teach us, not ghosts of our present and our future, those we hold in our hands, but spirits of our past. 3 here, 3 19th century ghosts, all relative contemporaries. Friends among them, Hester Jeffrey and Susan B. Anthony, and probably all people who saw each other at coffee hour, who awkwardly forgot each other's names and felt like it was too late to ask again because it was embarrassing. All people who became part of who they were because of who they knew here, of how they were formed, of how the ghosts of this place at that time taught them. Each of them lived in a complicated time of incredible tension where the stakes were incredibly high. A time when our country felt on the precipice of fracturing, something we fear now and was real then. A place and time where what was at stake was no less than suffrage, literally the right to vote, slavery, and our nation's soul. As the song Arise told the truth about earlier, our nation's soul has never been spotless. Our history, or histories, rather, because stories are told differently depending on who is doing the telling, have been bloody, and the cost has never been borne equally. And yet, the stakes do matter, and each of our 3 ghosts lived at this critical time. It reminds me of this time. Doesn't it feel that way? Incredible polarization and stakes that felt higher than we could possibly imagine. Who knew that in 2024, in the state of New York, we would be worried about what might happen in the future around access to abortion, and therefore would have to put forward Prop 1 to help create a stronger legal foundation? Who knew? Who knew that when we spoke of life-saving care, we'd be having the same conversations we were having in the last century? J.W. Hearn, in his letter to Frederick Douglass, in his 19th century way, didn't actually stop at just one comparison, but gave more. Not just the farmer who won't help his neighbor with the flood because he'd rather the lake be drained, but he also talked of healthcare, talked of doctors who would never think to deny their patients life-saving care because of consequences, though of course we know that reality exists now. And talked too of patients who certainly, in good sense, would not deny themselves life-saving access to medicine or preventative care because of uncertainty around side effects or future impact. J.W. Hearn clearly didn't know about the great mask battles of 2020 to on. But this idea of perfection not being the enemy of the good, this idea of perfection not being an obstacle to participation, lives on now. In writing to Douglass to congratulate him on building coalition, Hearn lifts up this great and important practice of finding common cause even when you don't agree. Many of us find ourselves in similar positions, making choices at the polling place where our choices never seem perfect. Many of us, with our hearts broken daily through the news and images of children being killed in what must be called a genocide in Palestine, and whose hearts break at the rising anti-Islamic and anti-Jewish sentiments that continue, in this country, find ourselves wrestling with the moral injury of what it means to cast a vote and participate in a system capable of such horrors. And yet, were the stakes not also high in their time? Were lives not being lost on a daily basis? Were unspeakable human tragedies not also happening? And would perfection not be a barrier to good? Hearn talked of the enemies of Douglass who combated with his work in Kansas, talked of the enemies of the cause of abolition, talked too of the allies of abolition who were so thorough in their commitment they could not stand compromise, but talked too of the wrestling of his own conscience, of our desire for consistency that leads us into a perfectionism that actually is not possible. Hearn's letter offers us both a witness to the complications of political action and a call to participate. Hearn and Jeffrey or Jeffries, whose name gets mixed up in the historical file all the time because it turns out the stories of Black women are not as well preserved as that of others, and Anthony all call us to participate because Unitarian Universalism understands us to be connected with the people around us, understands us to be embedded in communities and organizations of people where our actions impact others. We understand this not only in our work to protecting and participating in democracy, but also in work like the upcoming climate revival that will happen the Saturday after the election, where no matter what the results of the election are, our environmental justice ministry invites us to come together for common cause to build a better world. Invites us to remember that our participation in our collective cannot be limited only to the polling place. But Hearn's story continues just like that of others. And his second story of leaving his job, of doing what is not only directly against what he is getting paid for, which is to receive a message and to pass it on. That is what a telegraph operator does, but also illegal, also breaking with the state, with law enforcement. Hearn's second story offers us another glimpse into what is asked of us by our faith. Hearn's story does not happen in isolation. It happens in part rooted in relationships that pre-existed and a courage that's only possible when surrounded by a network of relationships. In getting up from the telegraph and asking someone else to take his place, Hearn is able to locate someone who knows where Douglass is staying. But so too does Hearn know, though he names his action as willing, in the face of any result or consequence, he knows that Douglass will be able to find people who will get him out of Philadelphia, get him to his home in Rochester, and get him out of Rochester to Canada. He knows, too, that if the law comes for him, he, too, knows people who will hide him and help him move. He knows that he is not alone. He knows that the women he saw in this congregation, whose names he can't remember, but who seemed to love each other, would protect and support him. He knows that others have taken risks like he will. He knows that he is not alone. He knows, too, that just as 5 years prior he had written a letter praising Douglass for his coalition building and his ability to move in circles where he did not agree with everyone, that his work as a person living faithfully with deep love in the world was not limited only to what he could express at the polling place, was not limited only to the letters that he could write. He knew he was called not only by the authority we place in our governments to protect our rights, but by a deeper truth that asks us to not only hold our rights and our freedoms, but also to the seed of love that exists within all of us. Hearn, in this moment, is called forth into a deeper courage by a community and what he would call God, and you may also, but that all of us recognize as a love and connection that supersedes the call of law at times. Hearn knows he is held by a love that will not leave him. Hearn knows that as much as his participation, which is not hindered by perfectionism, as much as his participation in the state is important, that is not his only role. That he held by the threads that connect each of us to one another, can tug too on those threads. That moral obedience to protecting the beloveds around us is something that he is called by. And so let us take the lessons of the ghosts that come before us, not only to participate even when it is hard, even when the choices feel impossible, even when our joy and our celebration bubbles up and we look around and wonder, is this allowed? It is. Even when all of that is complicated, let us never mistake the state as our salvation. Let us remember that our collective liberation is held strangely and beautifully by a love and a web of connection that moves through all of us. So I invite you to come vote early with us today. If you've already done it, good, you know how to do it. Come root us on. If you are thinking, I was planning to do it on November 5th, it's okay to be early. Come with us anyway. If you're thinking, I have an absentee ballot and all is well, my sister's dogs literally just ate her ballot, so you should probably come with us. And you should remember that you are called and held by something that sees you beyond the role of responsible citizen, that sees you beyond a participant that can impact collectively the world, but that knows you as love, knows you as joy, and knows you as connected deeply to my soul. Amen. Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in our closing hymn.
We shall
Ken was already over there, was reminding me to invite you all, Kens and Barbies, who are able to help stack the chairs that have arms after the service if you're able. That helps us take care of our space and our community. I invite us now to extinguish our chalice with our unison words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
After the service, if you're interested in voting, meet me right here in front, and we will carpool and figure out how we're going to get there together. Go in peace. Go in power. And above all, go in love, knowing that you are loved. I love you. Amen.